What's up, y'all? You're listening to the Extra Point College Football Podcast. I'm your host, Jacob Carnes, joined as always by my co-host, Daniel Hammock. Daniel, good to be back on a regular flow. How's your week been?
It's been good. I'm excited to jump in here. You know, there's a lot going on with the stock market, so we're going to, jump in on our stocks for college football. You know, after spring, how are we feeling? You know, we haven't dove in deep dive yet to our analysis of every division, every team, each preview, kind of get a thumbnail sketch of who each of us is looking at and maybe who each of us is kind of looking beside. But we have a very special guest today. Jacob, why don't you introduce him, because you're the one who, made this connection.
We have a very special guest. So I was in Arizona for work, travel for chicken, #travel for chicken, traveling for Chick-fil-A. And we were training in Tucson, and we had to do like an intro dinner with our participants. And Sarah Jane was this girl who's a participant, and she introduced her husband who came to the dinner. And college football came up somehow. And, one of the other trainers mentioned that I had a podcast, and I'm thinking that I'm a big deal because I have a podcast. And then we meet David, who tells me he's a college football writer for CBS Sports. And so I text you and Hunter about it while I'm Googling him walking to the restaurant, being like, oh my God, I know who he is. So yeah, it is an honor to have Mr. David Cobb of CBS Sports on the Extra Point. What's up, David?
Absolutely.
Yeah, man. Well, it's a pleasure to be here. Appreciate the intro. It was a funny circumstance for sure that led us to meet in Tucson, Arizona, of all places, since, we're both from the South, but glad to have made the acquaintance for sure.
David, so you work for CBS Sports. I know you told me you've previously been a beat writer for the University of Tennessee and for the Memphis Grizzlies, right?
Yeah. So I grew up in Memphis and went to Tennessee and graduated from there in 2015 and worked for the student newspaper while I was there and freelance for some local outlets and covered a lot of Tennessee football. The end of the Derek Dooley era and the beginning of the Butch Jones era, real exciting times in Knoxville. And then a couple of years after I graduated, I came back as the beat writer for the newspaper out of Chattanooga. And that was the end of the Butch era and the beginning of the Jeremy Pruitt era. And of course, that included the crazy coaching search that led to Jeremy Pruitt. And anyway, since then, I've moved on and covered the NBA for a little bit. And now I'm with CBS, where I do college football and college basketball. But most of my experience is with the SEC. But now I'm looking at things from a more national perspective. And it's good to be talking with you guys, because this is kind of that time of year where I transition out of doing basketball and start focusing more on football. So just getting notes together to talk with you guys has kind of helped me to focus on football, which is nice.
Got to get your feet wet. Now, you did mention one funny thing to me I think is worth mentioning. The timeline of Jeremy Pruitt's hire and the significance of that in your life.
Yeah. So they introduced him, I think it was December the 7th of 2017. And then Sarah Jane and I got married on December the 9th. So if you ever see pictures from our wedding, there's a reason why I don't have my hair cut and I don't even think I had time to really get my suit tailored, because the last month before that wedding was just insane, because they fired Butch after the Missouri game, which was like in mid-November or something, and then we went a whole month almost with this ridiculous coaching search, and John Curry going rogue and flying all over the country, and Shiano Sunday, and all of that was leading up to our wedding. So it was interesting, to say the least, but memorable, no doubt.
That's hilarious. Definitely memorable. Well, let's dive in. I know that David, CBS has released, the CBS Sports post-spring top 25. We have our Extra Point ranking is our top 25. And if you're listening to this, it's already on social media. And so, we're all taking stock of where a team's going to be come the fall. And it's as good a guess as anybody's, when we're this far out from fall, but it's fun to talk about. And so, especially with the rise of, is it Dogecoin, Dogcoin, Dogecoin, whatever, stonks. We're going to talk about team stocks that we are buying and selling. And I want to clarify, maybe at least for some of mine, this is buying and selling stock relative to who these teams are supposed to be, right?
And where they've been, right?
And where they've been. So, let's go positives first. Let's talk about team stock that we are buying for the 2021 season. Daniel, I throw it to you. What's a team you're buying for the 2021 season?
So if there's ever any doubt, I'm buying Miami, man. I'm buying Miami. They're on the rise. They're on the rise last year. I picked them a lot last year. This year, I'm really not trying to, give it away, but I'm not picking them to lose many games this year. So I like a lot that they're doing. Obviously, they start with Bama, so that's going to be super interesting. The whole story is going to be D'Eriq King. Is he coming back? Is he going to be healthy? How's that knee? My opinion is the Bama game doesn't really matter anyways. They're going to lose that game. So whatever, if he's back for that or not. My point, they've got not only D'Eriq King, but if he's not healthy, Jake Garcia coming in from Grayson High School, from Southern California originally, ends up coming over to Georgia last year with everything going crazy in California. He's a former 5-star, knocked down to a 4-star. You know how those re-rankings go. He's a high-end type starter. I see a lot of, upside in his future. And if he has to play this year, I think he's going to do well. They've fixed their wide receiver room. They've had a lot of trouble at wide receiver, and getting Charleston Rambo as a transfer from Oklahoma. And then this wide receiver class they're bringing in, led by Romello Brinson. They've also got Jacoby George and Brashard Smith, just several 4-stars coming in. We've seen that that's the quickest way to catch up in the arms race, is to have quarterback and a slew of receivers. You've got to have that going forward. So I feel really good about them. Oh yeah, by the way, the offensive line that we always make fun of, Zion Nelson, offensive tackle, is projected already by Todd McShay and a few others to be a top 5 pick next year in the draft. So just another year of growth for him. Big time offensive tackle. Definitely should get some play around him. And I mean, yeah, 3-headed beast in the backfield at running back. Cameron Harris coming back, which was a surprise. Don Chaney Jr. And then they just got Cody Brown, who is going to Tennessee. And then after the Jeremy Pruitt firing, he got released from his letter of intent and ended up deciding to go instead to Miami. Big boy out of Parkview. So that's going to be huge. Got a couple of good defensive backs in there. James Williams coming in as a recruit. Tyreek Stevenson. I know I've talked a lot. I'm really trying to sell you Miami's going to do it this year. So I've wrote down their schedule. I'm not going to do this for the other team that I bought stock in. I'm buying more stock in Miami. I have 9 wins written down without, I have 2 toss-ups, 9 wins, and 1 loss. The 1 loss is to Alabama, and to me it doesn't matter. Toss-ups, North Carolina and Pitt, those are both on the road. Everything else is a win. So if I'm starting with a floor of 9 wins, I feel pretty good about what they're doing this year.
Shoot. Yeah. I think if you listen to this podcast at all recently, Daniel's high on Miami. Daniel is to Miami as Jacob was to Iowa State last season.
It's happening.
David, what's the team you're buying stock in?
Yeah, good things happen to programs that move on from Mark Richt, I guess. But no, I figured y'all are Georgia folks. You might appreciate that. Yeah, no, okay. Well, there's also a little bit of a Georgia connection here with my pick in terms of a guy named Matt Luke. He's still the line coach at Georgia, right?
Mm.
Yes, sir.
Okay, cool. Well, anyway, I'm going Ole Miss for a team that I'm buying stock in, and I got a few reasons why. I see 9-3 as a real possibility. Here's the deal: they went 5-5 this past year, if you count the bowl win, right? And that was against an all SEC schedule, and then I think they played Indiana in the bowl, right? So, that even if they just go 500 against the SEC again, and they don't really progress at all, well, that's 4-4 right there, and then their non-conference schedule is easy enough to where they get to 8-4 right there, or 7-5 at the absolute worst. But in terms of the actual reasons why I'm buying Ole Miss, the SEC West is as wide open as it ever has been, and not obviously not at the top, but Alabama is the clear-cut favorite there. But, I mean, after Alabama, who's a sure bet in the West? I mean, A&M is talented, but they've got to replace Kellen Mond. LSU, just a total wild card, in my opinion, after, a serious regression last year and all the off-the-field stuff they're dealing with. And then you got Auburn with the first-year coach and Brian Harsin. And so, to me, Ole Miss is a pretty clear step ahead of those other teams in the division that have second-year coaches in Mississippi State and Arkansas. So, I just think that the fact that the West is so wide open, and the fact that Ole Miss out of the East, they get Tennessee and Vanderbilt this year. I mean, come on, like that is as easy as it gets. So, with that offense, and that schedule, I'm buying Ole Miss, potential 9-3 type of team, and the defense. I mean, it just can't be any worse, right? So, it just can't.
That's a good point. Yeah.
So I'm buying Ole Miss. Those are my reasons why. I just think it's an easy schedule. I think the West is wide open. So much talent back on offense, and the defense can't be worse.
Hey, they play Liberty and Louisville in the non-con.
That Liberty game is just going to be wild. It's going to be unbelievable. Yeah.
What'll be more wild is Kiffin's return to Knoxville. I will have all eyes on that game.
Yeah, it's. Because the Tennessee people wanted him. They would have taken him in a heartbeat, and obviously, that didn't quite pan out. But that game is going to be a really high scoring one. You can go ahead and bet the over on that one, I would say.
Daniel, you start us out with Miami. Miami is ranked 8th in our extra point rankings for post-spring. David, Ole Miss is ranked 24th in our post-spring rankings. I will go to the team that I actually ranked. I ranked them number 2, with the only reason being I will keep Alabama on top so long as it's Alabama. Like, until they prove me wrong, I will put Alabama as 1 going into the season. That's probably a pretty good bet. Ohio State. I mean, I had to fight people last year.
Jacob, I appreciate
I know.
that. Yeah.
But I will say, though, because, again, you got to think buying stock relative to where we think they're going to be. Ohio State, in a lot of rankings right now, is ranked like 4th or 5th in that top 5 group. Everyone pretty much has the same top 5, right? Alabama, Ohio State, Clemson, Oklahoma, Georgia. In some order, those are your consensus top 5. I think Ohio State might be the best of those teams. Quarterback is not a controversy because you've got 3 really good options with the way all 3 performed in the spring game. I think C.J. Stroud wins the job, but you've got depth there. Even if someone transfers, you have a very capable backup. Wide receiver, we've already seen one player transfer, but I'm only going to list 6, and that's doing a disservice to that wide receiver room because it's the best and deepest in the country, and it's not close. You have Chris Olave, who's going to return as an All-American. Garrett Wilson, who I think is better than Chris Olave. He'll be a first-round draft pick next year. Julian Fleming, former 5-star, who's a sophomore. Jackson Smith-Jigba, former 5-star, who's a true sophomore. And then Emeka Egbuka, who's a true freshman. Marvin Harrison Jr., who had an excellent spring game, true freshman. I just listed 5 5-stars and 1 4-star, and the 1 4-star is Chris Olave. Like, the best wide receiver room in the country, and it's not close. Treyvion Henderson, true freshman coming in at running back, he would have started over Trey Sermon this year. I truly believe that he's that good of a running back. Defensive line, veteran-laden, led by Zach Harrison, and then you've got players like Jack Sawyer, 5-star true freshman, coming in to play defensive line. Secondary was a weakness last year. They bring back a ton of experience. I'm buying Ohio State. If I'm picking it right now, they're going to win the Big Ten. They're, leagues above the Big Ten. They're in the playoff, in my opinion. It's just they've proven they can win a playoff game. Can they win the national championship? I think that's the question for Ohio State. That's the next step. Can they win the national championship? I'm buying Ohio State.
Yeah, I think the reason people are maybe not quite as high on Ohio State is because of the quarterback situation, but they've got everything that you could possibly want a new quarterback to walk into. All the tools are there around him.
Yeah.
So, yeah, I get you.
I'd rather, honestly, at this day and age with how they've recruited, I'd rather have a stocked wide receiver room and kind of a question mark at quarterback rather than having, answer at quarterback and then having a bunch of new receivers. The way it's gone recently, that's more where I lean anyway. So, and it's like what you were saying, Jacob. They're not going to go wrong with anyone they select. I think it will be C.J. Stroud. He just appears to be kind of the heir apparent. But it doesn't really matter who takes snaps. Ryan Day calling plays and all that talent around them. I think that's definitely a good place to be. For my next team, I'm going to the Big 12. I really like what TCU has coming back. So it's tough because Oklahoma is the sexy pick. I'm not picking TCU to win anything like what I'm expecting Oklahoma to do. I think Oklahoma should run away with the Big 12 this year. And then I do think that Iowa State will give them a little run for their money here and there. Well, that third team, I think, is going to be TCU this year. The way they played last year, they played Iowa State close, and that's without their quarterback, Max Duggan. And then, they beat Texas. I mean, they lost to Oklahoma by a couple touchdowns, and they lost to West Virginia by a couple touchdowns. But everything, I mean, they won every other game. They lost to Kansas State, by a touchdown. So 4 losses last year. I think they can get to 9-3. That's definitely where I see them this year. The only true loss I have on their schedule is Oklahoma. And then I have Texas, Oklahoma State, and Iowa State as toss-ups. So for me, the floor is 8 wins. I think they're going to win at least one of those toss-ups, Texas, Okie State, or Iowa State. I don't think that's out of the question. I'm interested to see, if Zack Evans can be the guy this year. Last year he came in kind of late and was, a role player here and there. Right now he's second on the depth chart. Can he get on the field regularly? His talent is that profile of, LaDainian Tomlinson. So can he get to that level for TCU? If he does, they could have a special year.
I like it.
Yeah,
I like
I'm
TCU.
going similar. My next pick is a similar type of program. I mean, we're talking about the ancient guard in college football with Gary Patterson at TCU. I'm going Iowa and Kirk Ferentz as a team that I'm buying stock in. And it's not like I got him, going to the playoff. I mean, when's the last time somebody from the Big Ten West, did that? But I got him like in my top 15. Most places I've seen him have him closer to 20. And here's why. We talked before the show started about how much, I like Iowa State and whatnot. And Iowa State looks great. But that second game of the season is the Cyhawk game. And if y'all remember last season, Iowa State struggled to begin the year. And they were really pretty bad in their first 2 games. They lost to Louisiana. Then they really struggled in their second game against it was TCU, I think. Anyway, Iowa's defense is loaded. Iowa won its last 5 games to end last season. And if Iowa State comes out slow again, I mean, we might be talking about the wrong team from the state of Iowa. I think Iowa's got, like I said, a really stout defense, a defense that didn't allow more than 21 points in a game for the last 2 months of the season last year. So I just think there's a really good chance that Iowa goes to Ames and wins that rivalry game. And all of a sudden the narrative in that state flips from Iowa State to Iowa real quick. And we're looking at the Hawkeyes being the top 10 team, from that state as opposed to Iowa State. I love Iowa State. Don't get me wrong, but I just see that as a real possibility. And for that reason, I'm buying Iowa.
I am so hot and cold on Iowa. I am so in the middle on I'm with you. They can win the West. And I also think they're a quarterback injury away from finishing 6th in the West. I'm so back and forth on Iowa. I'm going to take us to, a sunny day. Let's say 75 to 80 degrees. So, the palm trees blowing in the wind. LeBron's walking down the street in Beverly Hills and dang, I'm doing it again, man. I'm just listening to the sweet siren song of the USC Trojans.
Oh, I thought you were going to UCLA.
I just I've entertained the question of could this be the year that the Pac-12 cracks the playoff, and will it be USC? And it could be. I've gone so back and forth with this. I'm buying stock, period, because one, I think they're the best team in the Pac-12. I think they're better in Oregon because they have questions figured out that Oregon doesn't. A, quarterback. If Anthony Brown's starting at quarterback for Oregon, then sell your Oregon stock. He's not a fighter pilot at quarterback. USC, and it sounds like
Funny
it's
you
Anthony
mentioned
Brown's
that. I'm
job to
actually going to
lose.
get to that here in a minute.
So
it shouldn't be.
Oh, yeah.
It shouldn't be.
So USC is the team to beat in the Pac-12, and they have they check every box you want to check for an elite team. A, you got to have an explosive offense, and they check the box at quarterback with Keaton Slovis. They have a great wide receiver room, led by Drake London, Brew McCoy, and Grant Bryant Jr., who's coming in. Their defensive line, this is something they haven't had. Their pass rush is going to be lethal this year. Drake Jackson, he's projected to be a first-round draft pick. And then you've got Corey Foreman coming in, number one player in the country, 5-star true freshman that they kept home at USC. Their pass rush is going to be lethal this year. Their secondary lost a big piece in Hufanga at safety, but everybody else in the secondary returns. I'm a big buyer in USC. You got Keontae Ingram at running back as well. And I just think that this really could be the year, especially with the parity that could happen with Alabama, Ohio State, and Clemson having to replace their starting quarterback. The door is open for USC to crash the playoff. So I will buy me some USC stock.
You're on your own, man. I ain't falling for that again.
You love it.
I am interested with Keontae Ingram out there. I mentioned that in the last podcast. I think that kind of completes their setup there. But, let's put a pin in that. We're going to talk about next what teams we're selling stock in. We've done buttered up all these great teams. Now let's talk about the ones we're not believing in. But first, what you guys could do is you just follow us on social media at the Extra Point Pod, both on Instagram and Facebook. Go to the link tree in there, find us on YouTube, go there, please subscribe, hit the notifications bar. We're going to be posting all of our content there so that you can watch it, and that will help us out to continue doing what we love doing. And then best of all, you can interact with us there or on Apple Podcasts by leaving a 5-star review. That's going to help us make the show exactly what you want it to be. The show is about you. We want it to be interactive. So like Jacob and I both mentioned a couple times, we've got these previews coming up. There is a little bit more we can talk about. There's something you want us to mention about your favorite team, or if you're a fan of an independent or a group of 5 school, we are, not going to do the entire group of 5. We're selecting the top schools. If you have someone, you're an alumni, comment, let us know, and we'll preview that school when we do the independents and the group of 5. But other than that, let's get on to some of these teams we're selling. For me, you already know. I'm wearing the shirt. I'm a Gator hater. All right. Standard issue. If you live in the state of Georgia, they give these out. So I am selling Florida stock, and I'm selling it as quickly as I can. So the best way to replace talent that leaves for the NFL, Jacob, how do you do that?
You recruit.
All right. Well, I don't believe in how Florida has recruited out of high school. They've definitely gotten some transfers. I think it's going to help. I'm not going to be complete. I'm not saying Florida, the sky's falling, the bottom is falling out. But last year they caught lightning in a bottle. They had a freak unicorn at tight end with Kyle Pitts. I have to like him now because he's an Atlanta Falcon. But Kadarius Toney, not enough gets talked about with him. He was amazing last year and really put an entire season together of just elite playmaking ability. Kyle Trask, you lose your quarterback. I'm not sold on Emory Jones. I think that Dan Mullen's been wanting to start him for 3 years. And the fact that he hasn't beaten out the other 2 guys when he had Felipe Franks and then Kyle Trask, I think that says more about Emory Jones than it does about Kyle Trask holding him off. Because if we're talking about tools, Emory Jones has had all the tools. So I'm wondering how that is. Those are my biggest points for Florida, them losing those 3. Like I said, I don't think the bottom falls out. I think they're still going to be the second best team in the East. I'd be, it would be dumb of me to say that I think that they're going to drop to 3rd or 4th or, something crazy like that in the East. The East is just not that strong right now. Best I can see is, or the worst I could see, I should say, is them falling to third, maybe Kentucky bumping up to second just because of how Mark Stoops runs that program. But they play Alabama this year. That's not a good draw for them. They always play LSU, and LSU was down last year. LSU still beat them last year, but LSU was down last year, and I think LSU is going to kind of have a little rebound. Obviously, Georgia is going to be back, we expect. So it's just not looking great for Florida. So I'm getting out while I can. I'm selling the stock, and I think Florida's going to be down. I think you could probably see, well, they went 8-4 last year, and it was a good year. I think they could probably go 8-4 in the regular season this year, and it'd be somewhat of a disappointment.
David?
Well, I would say that I agree with you, but we just learned that our next stop for Sarah's job is going to be Gainesville. So I don't want to endanger myself before I go, and literally live for at least a month about a mile away from the swamp. So I'll hold out faith in Florida for now. But the team that I'm selling first is one that Jacob alluded to earlier, and that's Oregon. And he alluded to the exact reason why I'm selling Oregon, which is I think Mario Cristobal is going to, and Joe Moorhead too, for that matter, are going to mess around and play Anthony Brown at quarterback. And I think it's a pretty clear Kelly Bryant, Trevor Lawrence situation there with Ty Thompson, where you've got the veteran in Anthony Brown, who's been through it at Boston College and is not bad, but he's not get you to the playoff type of good either. And if you look at Ty Thompson, man, he's got all the tools for sure. I mean, it doesn't take long of watching his tape or just seeing a few minutes of their spring game to see that he's legit. There's a reason he's a 5-star prospect. And I look back at last season and Oregon being down, probably being the most talented team in the Pac-12, but losing 3 games, and then kind of wanting to play Anthony Brown at quarterback, but really not doing it until the very end of the season. So, like, if you didn't believe in Tyler Shugg and you knew that Anthony Brown was probably going to be the future of that position, then why didn't you play him more during the season? Or why did it take you so long? I don't know. And so to me, I just see a lot of hesitancy in that staff to play the right quarterback. And so, I mean, Oregon's schedule is tough. I forgot who do they have? They play Ohio State, right? They play
in
Ohio
Columbus.
State, like week 2.
In Columbus.
Yeah,
Yep.
Exactly. And so, like, you pencil that in as a loss. Now all of a sudden your margin for error is gone in terms of maybe making the playoff. And so I think eventually they're going to start Ty Thompson, but I'm afraid they're going to go into the season with this mindset of trying to only play him in 3 or 4 games to preserve a season of eligibility. I think that's a bad idea with somebody that talented, because chances are he's going to be going to the draft after 3 seasons regardless. So I'm fading Oregon right now. That's my primary reason. They were down last year, and I don't know that Cristobal has the sort of offensive chops. And maybe
they were down. They were Pac-12 champs.
Whatever, man. That's the most bogus championship I've ever seen in my life.
My Pac-12 champion.
But I can't talk. I predicted Cal to win the Pac-12 last year, and then they went like 1-3. But they did beat Oregon. So anyway,
crazy year.
It was. I'm fading Oregon, so I know I'll pass it on to you, Jake.
Yeah, you're right though. If Oregon messes around at quarterback, like, you play Ohio State second game of the season, obviously, but I mean, Stanford, Cal, and UCLA back to back. That's not an easy run for Oregon. So I will sell stock on a team for a very similar reason to Oregon, and that's Notre Dame. Now, this is not to appease the Notre Dame is always overrated crowd, because they're not. Notre Dame has been very properly rated the past few years, been in the college football playoff twice. So Notre Dame, I'm selling my stock though. You lose your starting quarterback who broke school records for, 3-year starter in Ian Book, program changer at quarterback. But here's the thing. You bring in a quarterback in Tyler Buckner who, like Ty Thompson, has all the tools. And all the chatter out of Notre Dame right now is that this is Jack Cohn's job to lose, the transfer from Wisconsin.
Mm-hmm.
And we have previously called Jack Cohn on this podcast Jake Fromm Cohn, because that's exactly who he is as a quarterback. And that works whenever you're running a non-explosive offense. So if Notre Dame's not going to have an explosive offense, and they're lacking some receiver talent. They had 10 players drafted in the draft, tied for second of most of anybody. They've recruited decently, but they're not recruiting at a top 5 level. It's more of a top 10 level. You lose a cornerstone of your defense in Jeremiah Owusu-Koramoah. My biggest thing, honestly, though, is if Jack Cohn is starting at quarterback, I'm selling my stock in Notre Dame.
You're fading them because of Cohn.
100%. And that could have been my only reason. Offensive line is rebuilding. You might start 2 true freshmen at offensive line. That's been a strength of the team the past 3 seasons. Both of your defensive ends gone. You're not going to have that much of a pass rush. But, yeah, number one reason, if Jack Cohn's leading your quarterback competition, like, I'm selling my stock until you start Tyler Buckner. And if you mess around too badly, you play at Florida State in week 1. I'm not saying I'm buying Florida State to be a top 10 team, but I'm also saying don't mess around in Tallahassee in week 1.
And they got Mackenzie Milton. Look, I'm with you. I don't think Notre Dame makes it back to the ACC championship this year. I'll be straight up with that.
No chance.
Yeah, I think they are in serious jeopardy of not making the ACC championship this year. So, hey, they had too many players called during the draft for me to expect anything big of them this year.
I'm with you. Daniel, what's your next team?
All right. So my next team, it seems like this team is getting bought by everybody, and I don't really understand. They were bought a lot last year. It's Texas A&M. I'm just not on board with them. I didn't even really like Kellen Mond. I honestly feel like they're probably better with Zach Calzada at quarterback than they will be with Kellen Mond. That being said, I do think that they're still going to win a bunch of games this year. Bama still might be their only loss. I mean, they'll lose to Alabama, especially since Jimbo just ran his mouth the other day about whatever. He was talking to boosters, but it got out, and it's going to be up on the bulletin board in the weight room at Alabama. So, but I mean, to go along with what David said earlier about Ole Miss, I like Ole Miss. They're obviously on the schedule as SEC West. Same with LSU and Auburn. I think that those are 3 toss-ups. They could lose. I don't think that they'll lose all of them. I think they're going to go into the Alabama game undefeated, though, because prior to them, they played Kent State, Colorado, New Mexico, Arkansas, and Mississippi State. So we're going to get to Alabama October 9th, and Texas A&M is going to be undefeated, and we're going to be talking about them. Alabama is going to win by 3 scores minimum, and then they're going to go beat Missouri, beat South Carolina, have a bye week, and then they'll be into November, and they'll only have 1 loss. So they're going to be a story going into that weekend with Auburn. I could see Auburn beating them. I could see Ole Miss beating them, and I could see LSU beating them. They could lose 3 of their last 4 games. Not saying they're going to lose all 3. I think they at least lose 2 this year, though. But, yeah, I think a lot of people are tagging them as either number 2 in the West or even potentially challenging Alabama for people who want to keep doing that and saying that that's going to happen. I'm going to believe it when I see it. But, yeah, I think I'm selling the A&M stock as soon as I can.
David?
That's what I'm saying. The SEC West is just totally wide open after Bama. I mean, you could go ahead and – I'm sure a lot of Bama fans have already booked their hotels for the SEC championship game. I just don't see it. Like, Bama's going to the SEC title game, and,
to be
everybody
fair,
else
most of those fans live in Atlanta now.
Division.
So. I'm saying they all live in Atlanta. Yeah, they don't live in Alabama. All the Alabama fans are in Atlanta, and they grew up being fans of other schools. And somewhere around 2009, they magically started being an Alabama fan and growing their hair to the side, and they did it right.
Yeah,
so.
There's a lot of them in Tennessee too. It's weird.
That's weird how that happened.
I haven't seen many out here in Arizona, but yeah. I'm sure if I look, there's probably some out here, but the SEC West is wide open. Going back to the ACC for my second selling team though, and it's North Carolina. Look, love Mac Brown. He just makes me feel nostalgic, and I ranked him. We're doing a ranking of our top Power 5 conference coaches soon, and I've got him in the top 10. I mean, it's no knock on Mac Brown. if North Carolina goes 8-4, they're still a whole lot better than they were under Larry Fedora. But anyway, I'm selling North Carolina because of all the playmakers that they're losing. Obviously, they're losing Javonte Williams and Michael Carter from the running back room. Both of them were 1,000-yard rushers who also helped out a ton in the pass game. And then Diami Brown and Daz Newsome, both gone as well. So, I mean, that's just so much production right there. I don't even know the percentage on it, but it's just astronomical in terms of who Sam Howell was distributing the football to. And so they've just got so much to replace on the playmaking side of things that I don't know that they're going to be as explosive and as dynamic and just, totally prolific as they were last season. And so for that reason, I think they end up taking a step back this season. And I like Sam Howell. I mean, how can you not? And I think that offensive line should be pretty good. It's a veteran group. But again, what does being a veteran group mean this year when everybody's veteran with all the super seniors? So I don't think that means as much as it normally does. And we see it more and more now in college football, how important the receivers are. I mean, with Alabama last year, that obviously Devontae Smith winning the Heisman Trophy, first time for a receiver to do that in so long. And that's just emblematic of how important that position is now. And I just have too many questions about North Carolina in that type of way to feel like, they're a legitimate, top 7 or 8 team. I think they're still going to be a top 25 team. I just don't see them challenging for an ACC title due to the number of playmakers that they lost.
And they're going to lose to Miami. We already said it earlier. So.
There you go.
I'm with you on North Carolina. I don't know if I'm selling stock, but I have questioned just everyone being like, oh yeah, they're going to be fine. Like the defensive line is young, but secondary is going to be sick. Offensive line is veteran. And like Sam Howell, I'm like, but who's he going to throw to or hand the ball off to?
They got Ty Chandler from Tennessee, but I watched him for 3 years now pretty regularly. And he's a good player, but I don't see him playing that type of role. Right. I don't see him being a Javonte Williams or a Michael Carter. I mean, he's a good player, but he's not as good as those guys were. And so if you're banking your hopes on him, then, I still need more. I still need more to really buy it.
Well, it's funny because we're talking about them relative to where they are. And when Jacob has asked me so far this offseason, hey, how do you feel about North Carolina? They are losing a lot. We talked about the draft, losing both those running backs. And I mentioned Ty Chandler and said, hey, look, I mean, that's interesting that he's going there because that offensive line's back and he's got the great passing attack with Sam Howell and he's coming back. But for me, in my head, they're not ranked in the top 10 preseason. They're ranked like 15. And so it's easy for me to say, oh yeah, I mean, I'm good with them. I'm buying stock. But then I keep looking at all these preseason polls and they're ranked 7. And I'm like, okay, no. I don't buy them as a top 10 team. I think they're probably just outside of that. And like what you were saying, they're good. They're going to probably be, top 20, top 15, something like that. I feel good about that. But yeah, putting that top 10 mark on them, I'm not so sure.
Yeah, we had them at 7 at CBS, and I don't know. I mean, it makes me wonder how high some of my colleagues voted them because I didn't have them that high. I mean,
Chip had them number 1 probably. I think Chip had them as number 1 team.
My last team, I'm going to stay in the ACC, and I need to hit the pause button and say again, this is relative to where they have been ranked. The Clemson Tigers. So I've kind of said this, off podcast. Daily, you and I have talked about this. I've talked with some friends about this. Clemson, I think, okay, they've recruited at an all-time level. I will say that. Like, people who have said, roped Clemson's name into the Alabama, Ohio State, Georgia recruiting conversation were wrong until like 2020. 2020 was the first year they ever had a top 5 class, ever. And so I think we are not taking into account just how good Trevor Lawrence is. Like, everyone says, oh, well, DJ's a 5-star. Look what he did in the Notre Dame game. Notre Dame dared him to throw the ball and said, we're okay with you throwing 400 yards, and he did. But Trevor Lawrence is not just some 5-star quarterback. Trevor Lawrence is a once-in-a-decade quarterback at the play for Clemson. I think the gap between him and DJ Uiagalelei is much larger than we were anticipating. Because
kudos for the pronunciation, man. I mean, hats off. Well done.
Hey, Daniel corrected me the first time I said it wrong. So
all it takes is correcting Jacob one time, and then he just internalizes it. And then he's been sitting in his room just anytime we're off camera, he's just staring at himself in the mirror, and he's just saying, Uyunglele. Because he even came back at me, and he's like, I don't think you're right, Daniel. And I was like, yes, here is the pronunciation, him saying it himself.
I just call him DJU, so kudos.
There you go. So yeah, I think the gap there is large. Running back. No one has stepped up in that running back room, and you lose the ACC's all-time leading rusher. Again, have they recruited well? Sure. But are we underestimating the gap between the ACC's all-time leading rusher and whoever will step up maybe in that running back room?
Well, and you're going to be counting on potentially a true freshman at this point. Previously, DeMarcus Bowman could have been stepping in. He's out. He's going to Florida. So now you're probably looking at Will Shipley. Like you said, he's brand new.
Offensive line should be better than last year. But then I look at, okay, the running game is going to be a big question mark because we don't know who's going to step up. Quarterback should be fine. I just don't think he's Trevor. Like, I think he's going to be really good. I just don't think he's Trevor Lawrence. Who is he going to throw the ball to? Clemson's wide receiver room was not, I say great because we're comparing them to Alabama and Ohio State. Clemson's wide receiver room was not great last year, and they just lost their two best receivers to the NFL draft. Now, you return Justin Ross, right? How good is he going to be coming off of injury? After that, you've got Joseph Nagata, and then who else in that wide receiver room? No one has stepped up yet. Defense is going to be sick. Defense is going to be really, really good. But I've seen this before. When you return a good running back and a good offensive line and no wide receivers with a sick defense, because that was Georgia in 2019. Like, that's exactly who that team was, and they got smoked by LSU in the SEC championship. So that being said, like, I think Clemson's good enough to go 11-1 on the schedule. Like, their schedule's a joke, but I think this could be the worst Clemson team we've seen in 4 years. Therefore, I'm selling my Clemson stock. I know it's a bold statement, but again, we're talking about a team that lost one regular season game in 3 seasons. So
I'll give you credit, Jacob. You know, for you stepping out on the line for Ohio State earlier. Now you really are putting your money where your mouth is with Clemson. So I'll take it.
Well, and it sets up nicely for Daniel because if Clemson is down, I think Miami's window of opportunity is now.
You got to watch our ACC preview. All right. I teased it to Jacob in January, and he's like, Daniel, you're crazy. And then we kind of looked at each other and said, well, we'll see where we are in August. All right. So I'm feeling pretty good about Miami in the old ACC championship. I don't think
bold.
That's what college football needs. That's what college football needs is something is like, Miami taking down Clemson, winning the ACC. Like, I need some of that in college football because we got that top 5. And it's just, everybody knows it. It's just kind of boring. But anyway, yeah.
And look at that. We wouldn't even need an expanded playoff for Miami to take down Clemson in the ACC championship. So look at that. Everybody wins.
It's all about the U.
Well, fair enough. I won't get into that. You guys can have me back on later, and we'll do the playoff discussion. We'll do.
Hey,
that.
This is recorded. I'm taking you up on that. David, thank you so much for being on the Extra Point. Be sure to follow him on Twitter at David Cobb. Is that right?
Yeah, David W. Cobb. Yeah, there's a W.
At David W. Cobb.
A former Titans running back, a former Minnesota and former Titans running back named David Cobb, who kind of has stolen some of my thunder online over the years. But anyway, yeah, I got to use that middle initial to differentiate. So David W. Cobb.
You can follow him on Twitter at David W. Cobb. You can also see the CBS Sports Top 25 online that David was a part of. You can follow Daniel on Twitter at Deep South Daniel. You can follow me on Twitter at Jacob Carnes with a K. That will do it for this edition of The Extra Point. He is David. He is Daniel. I'm Jacob. See you.